I was aware of what was going on between the governor and the chancellors. It's something that I was reading in the newspapers continuously. Uh, so I was not nervous. I was surprised, delighted, and I thought that the 43 years that I have spent in both being a performing artist and running an institution like Darpana and seeing that it changes as the world changes, as society changes, as technology changes, that I could bring all of that experience to Kalamandalam. You know, when I was growing up, Kalamandalam not only had a name, but it lived up to the promise. Over the last few decades, that has not been the case. The brand is still very strong and it deserves to be nurtured. And I thought this was a wonderful opportunity for me at this point in my career to be able to use my experience and I hope my wisdom. In the middle of grand rehearsals for a performance of ours called Conference of the Birds, I suddenly saw 6 missed calls from a very senior comrade. And I called back and was asked, would you like to be the Chancellor of Kalamandalam? And I was taken aback for a second, for 5 seconds, and then said, yes, I would be honored to be. My first visit was early last month, and I spent 4 days primarily trying to speak to all the stakeholders about what their issues were, what their problems were, what they wanted changed, what they thought could be a solution, and so on. And I had an extremely rewarding experience there. I have to also say that I have an amazing team in the Vice Chancellor and the Registrar, both of whom think very similarly and have a vision that we can share jointly with the rest of the stakeholders and take forward. I watched a lot of the performances. I think the standard is extremely good. However, I do think that it is stuck in a time warp and that much more needs to be done to revitalize interest in those arts from different audiences. That means that I would see a huge opportunity to repackage some of the things, to reapply some of the things to other fields, other spheres. Like you might be aware that in Darpana, we have been using the performing arts to talk of social issues for many years. We've been working with different ministries, whether education or health or science and technology, in seeing how the performing arts, which are such a cogent language, how they can be made to enhance other opportunities, other learnings, other development issues. And I think those are the kind of things that have never been thought of. And today you can't live in a silo called the arts because there is no funding for the arts, and Kerala Kalamandalam is suffering from a finance deficiency, which is huge. And so that's a whole other thing that I have to tackle. But I think there are immense possibilities. The standards are very good, but what to do with those standards needs to be rethought. I'm going to go around to all Malayalis asking them to put their wallets where their mouths are. Kerala Kalamandalam desperately requires funds that are not government funds. So I shall be reaching out to all of you. Only as a child and a growing up adolescent when Amma used to visit and I would tag along. The only other time was when I spent 6 weeks along with the Kalamandalam group, and Gopi was a young dancer then in 1978, when Amma led a delegation sent by Morarji Desai and Atal Bihari Vajpayee to China just before they reopened diplomatic ties after a 24-year hiatus after the Chinese aggression. So I spent the entire time with them, sharing the stage, sharing the traveling, and it was a very special time, and I got to know some of them closely. I came with no fixed view of what it would be like. So I came really with a blank slate, but with the brand Kalamandalam very much in my head. And also the fact that it had not been doing as well as it should be doing. And as somebody who comes from a management background, a management of change background, and an arts background, it's for me a very exciting challenge to be able to nurture it back and to be able to take all the stakeholders with me in reinventing it for the 21st century without losing out on the core essence of the arts. But I'm somebody, being, I suppose, my father and my mother's daughter, I'm somebody who feels that technology can enhance tradition. And tradition is not something that is stuck. Tradition is what we are creating today. What perhaps was seen as my very radical work 30 years ago is today seen as tradition. One of the issues there is that there are people from many different mental centuries. And for instance, I was very surprised when the students came up to me and said that the girls are treated very differently from the boys, because all three of us, the Vice Chancellor, the Registrar, and I, are very, very certain that we want a caste and gender neutral institution. That was one of the first conversations we had. So I said, who made these rules? And the girls said, these are rules. And when I discussed it with the Vice Chancellor and Registrar, they said, there are no such rules. So where did what somebody's inherited patriarchy of 50 years ago become the reality for today's students? So one of the things I did on the last day of my first visit is that we got rid of those non-rule rules so that the girls could be safe, but as free as the guys to roam the campus and to not be stuck and locked up in their hostel rooms and to not have to wear odnis if they didn't want to, and things like that. You know, these are not rules, but are passed off as rules because nobody questions them. And we need to separate the wheat from the chaff. I think a lot of things which were true of the Gurukul system maybe 100 years ago, perhaps even 50 years ago, may not hold valid today in the day and age in which we live, where every child in every village has a smartphone. Some of that might not be necessary. So, I mean, I was being brought up at a time when gurus used to throw their tattakari sticks at students, and Amma absolutely forbade that. But is that part of learning Bharatanatyam? I don't think so. And so there are a lot of things like that which were perhaps necessary or seen as corporal punishment, for instance, was seen as a necessary part of education, and is not today. And we know that it's not right. So there are a lot of things that were not right that may have been vaguely right 50 years ago. And we need to separate those out from the core of the classical styles or the classical music. And I think that's a big task. I will know when I come back next week, but my announcements were greeted with great jubilation from the girl students. There are also simple things like, for instance, one of the complaints was that the incinerator for menstrual pads was so far away from the girls on the third floor. And when they were in great pain, they were unable to get to it. And that was a sort of thing that the registrar had already thought of. Machines had been ordered for every floor, but this has not been communicated neither by the students to the registrar nor by the registrar to the students. So, you know, there were things like that also, which may be in the process, but haven't actually been translated. One of my challenges in Darpana has been that how do I get a 15-year-old in, I don't know, in some city, some small town in North India, interested in classical dance? I'm competing with Bollywood, I'm competing with item numbers, I'm competing with Punjabi folk pop music, I'm competing with all sorts of things. So what can I do to grab their attention enough to bring them into wanting to know more? And that's one of the challenges I see, that, you know, the 15-year-old on a street in Ahmedabad is not going to come to a Kerala temple to see an all-night performance. And an all-night performance is not necessary to be seen to be grabbed by Kathakali. So I would like to go to all the film schools in Kerala and say, come to Kalamandalam, take one style and make me a 30-second video that we can put on social media that will be interesting enough to grab attention and to say, oh, wow, what is this? I need to know what this is. Now, that's already bringing together filmmakers and performers, or filmmakers and musicians. How does a filmmaker make something that is so eye-catching that even if I'm not interested in Indian art, I will still look at it. I think coming to Kerala and going and looking at villages which have 8 and 9 day festivals of classical dance and music, coming from Gujarat, it was like going from the desert into a rainforest. I mean, the sheer spread and percolation down of the classical arts is just incredible in Kerala. One wouldn't dream of a festival. I mean, even for us in Darpana to hold a 8 day festival and to get audiences for it is so difficult. And there, I went off to the Gauri festival in Palagat, and I've been invited to some other village festival where it's not government funded at all. The people from the village came to me and said that they go around houses collecting money, and then they hold this annual festival, unheard of anywhere else that I know of, certainly. Certainly in the sort of northern states, in the western states, unheard of.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting anything stupid like instead of chutti, wear a mask. I mean, that for me is blasphemy. But the very concept of time has changed. The average focus span of a young person is like 25 seconds. So if we want to continue having a live audience, then we have to change our concept of time as well without bastardizing the art. There might be a difference in what I might think is not bastardizing and what somebody else might think in bastardizing or diluting. But we still need an audience. You can't have an art that is only a museum art. That is not what India is about. I think our greatest strength as a country is that all our traditions are living. They might be dying today, languages might be dying, but the fact that we have not fossilized something and we don't need to visit it in a museum. Like, for instance, when in the United Kingdom, they were trying to revive something called Morris dancing, they had to look at films because there were no Morris dancers left. Or in China, when they were trying to undo what Mao had done to all the arts, they had no references. So when I was traveling China in 78, they would say, this is Chinese dancing, and they would actually be doing Western ballet, and then for communism, they would do a pirouette and then throw a hand grenade. But that's still Western dancing. We actually have so much that is alive, and we need to repurpose it, refocus it, repackage it without taking away the old. So yes, we know that traditionally Kathakali is an all-night performance. We know that Bharatanatyam used to be done with the dancer facing the deity in the sanctum sanctorum. We know that it can still be done as something that represents the tradition as it came from way back. But you can't expect today's audiences to do that. So I think we have to find a mix so that both can exist. And I said to the artists at Kalamandalam, I said, I am interested in doing lots of interesting things. And there might be those of you who don't want to do them, and that's fine. But if I can have a group who is willing to experiment and not feel, oh my God, what is happening, then I would love to work with them. I talked to Dr. Beena, your minister, and told her how we had been working with the ministries, and I am hoping that we can take that further. You know, in about 15 years ago, the Piramal Research Laboratory, Pharmaceutical Research Laboratory, was going to be inaugurated by President Kalam. And Swati Piramal came to Amma and said, will you create a dance piece on the history of science? And we created this piece, and President Kalam wanted it to go to every school to take away children's fear of science and maths. Then we hadn't done it, and I have just revived it for a science fair that was happening in Hyderabad. And an audience of 2,000, hundreds of people came back to me and said, you have to take it to schools. So I'm trying to now find the funding of how to take it to schools to remove the fear of maths and science and algebra and trigonometry from children by packaging it differently. Is that diluting either the sciences or Bharatanatyam? I don't think so. There are 13, and we want to make Bharatanatyam and Kuchipudi full departments, so that we are hoping that by next June, we can offer them as BAs. Just
Okay.
now, I'm quite surprised to find that some of the departments have a boys only policy. I very much need to change that so that every course is available to all genders, not only two genders, but all genders.
Okay.
There is a certain caste bias that I need to break. I also think that having children wake up at 4 o'clock, then work till about 12, then go to a regular school for 2 hours doesn't work, because the teachers teaching the regular school, which means eighth, ninth standards and SSC and plus two and so on, say the children are so tired by the time they get there that all they do is sleep. And I
Mm.
think some of that kind of stuff that needs to be looked at and seen how it can be made more effective while changing schedules around perhaps. And both Dr. Narayan and Dr. Rajesh are very open to this conversation. So there are lots of things at different levels. There are immediate things like I think everybody needs to speak English. It's a great limitation that they don't. And therefore, we are trying to bring in a separate English course that all the kids want very much. And I think some of the teachers want as well. I also think that every girl should have a self-defense course taught to her. There are self-defense courses that teach you in 1 month basically how to be safe. And I think every woman in the country needs to know how to be safe. We'll think of behavior change in the long run, but for the moment, girls need to be safe. Then you don't have to worry so much about them going out into the town alone or in small groups or so on. Because whatever we say, we know the kind of catcalls and violence that goes on, the kind of uh, stupid word, eve teasing that goes on, the kind of abuse that goes on, and we need to protect them for that. So there are things like that. And then there are long time vision things that need to be looked at. We are probably getting 10 extra acres of land. I would like to ideally make it into a campus which shows sustainability and Kerala architecture both, not build with cement, but actually get architects that will make the new Kerala Kalamandalam campus a visit-worthy campus, even if you're not interested in the arts. We have done that with our amphitheater Natrani. It's a green amphitheater. It's probably the only green, technologically extremely well equipped amphitheater in India, certainly, but I probably think in Asia. And I think we need to look at those goals because climate change and sustainability and all these are very much upon us. We can't say that I'm an artist and therefore won't think of any of those things. I haven't gone into the actual teaching, but I think there are things which need to be changed, which is, for instance, if you want to do a BA and an MA in something, that is 6 years. And if you have started from the eighth grade learning a particular uh, performance technique, say Chenda or Madalam or so on, to pull it on for 8 or 12 years just doesn't make sense. It is something that can be taught in 2 years, maybe 3 years. So just because you want a BA or an MA to go on dragging it longer and longer and longer doesn't make sense. So we have discussed looking at that. And I think over the next few months, we will look at it and see how they can do ancillary things in the intervening years. I think that is something that we need to look at. I'm an Indian. I think,
Very good.
I think, Amma and Papa used to say something very interesting, and it's also part of Montessori education, which is that as long as your roots are strong enough, the branches can go anywhere they want, and the roots
Yeah.
shouldn't be afraid of where the branches are going, or about which birds sit on it or who eats the fruit. I think that kind of insecurity needs to go away. Uh, the 2002 genocide against the Muslims, which has just had its 21st anniversary, if that's what you want to call the tragic events. I took the administration to the Supreme Court as being responsible for it. And for many years after that, there were false cases filed against me. I had to give up my passport. I had to report to the police station twice a day. The attempt was to stop me from being a dancer. My dance income was the major income for Darpana Academy. And by doing this, they were trying to shut us down. And it has continued in many, many different ways, like phone calls going from the political offices to people who want to hire me as a dancer. Um, People who I've known who are in the IAS not taking phone calls from me. It's fairly all pervasive. I was terrified because my children were very young. My mother was of an age when I didn't want her dragged into any of this. I didn't want any of the staff at Darpana to be harmed. So it can be very terrifying. It's even more terrifying today. It can be terrifying because once the government wishes to unleash its power on you, uh, you are nothing. But all I can say is that my truth is my truth. I don't think I can live any other way. And when I see injustice of any kind, when I see exploitation of the poor, of the minorities, I'm a public person. I speak about it. I dance about it. I sing about it. I talk about it. And I think I am very afraid for the identity of India at the moment. And thank God for some of the states of the South and some of the states in the rest of India which have opposition governments who are speaking about it. I mean, you must have known about what happened in Telangana last week when the Minister of Culture forbade the Kakatiya Heritage Committee from having me dance at the World Heritage Site of the Ramappa Temple, saying, and this was quoted by Mohan Guruswamy, saying that how can somebody who is a critic of the Prime Minister be allowed to perform in a ASI monument, and he stopped me from performing. So the Telangana government had me performing outside, but it's as recent as last month. Again, I ask, how does it matter? We are such small players, and you are so gigantic and so all-powerful, and you have bhaktas everywhere. Why this fear of questioning? Questioning is in our Vedanta, questioning is in the Upanishad, questioning is the real essence of Sanatan Dharma. All the Abrahamic religions demand that you don't question. Why are we becoming like them? We have such a wonderful, pluralistic, primary culture in India. We should be leading the way with that questioning and curiosity and discussion and debate. I think arrests being used and ED raids being used, whether on the BBC or Dainik Bhaskar or Amnesty International or individuals or my friend Harsh Mandar is completely unconstitutional. And my question to a government which has such a huge majority is, why are you so insecure? You have such a huge majority that all of us little animals can say whatever we want and question whichever way you want. Why do you need to kill a mosquito with a hammer or with a bulldozer? And I think it's wrong. I think I believe in Manish Sisodia. I have known him personally even before the ministry was formed. I think what he has done with the education system is amazing. And basically, with the help of Godi media, you can make the most innocent act look like a heinous crime. And that is what is happening. I have been at the receiving end of it for many years in Gujarat, so I know.
Okay.
Very deep connections. I feel very much part of my Malayali lineage. Malayali food is my favorite food. I think my DNA
What do
is
you
much more
like?
my mother's than I like all the things in your sadhya. I mean, I would like to have Malayali food at every meal if I could. I'm a vegetarian, but I would love to have it. And uh, I have tried to learn Malayalam. I understand a good 85–90% of it. I need to be thrown into an all Malayalam speaking household for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks. You see, what happens is that every Malayali that I meet wants to learn English and Hindi. So they end up trying to speak broken English and Hindi and not Malayalam with me. So yes, I think this is a good opportunity. And I have promised the students that in a few months, I will promise I will try and speak it. It's a question. You know, it's funny because when I was learning French for the Mahabharata, I started off by learning the script because it was an 11-hour production and I had 5 husbands to argue with. So there was a lot of French learning. And I could not, for the 2 years that I was doing the French production, I could not speak it. I would not have a conversation. I would speak in English. They would speak back to me in French and I would speak in English and then throw in a word or two of French. The minute I actually finished the French Mahabharata and started working on the English Mahabharata, it was like a dam broke. And now French is probably my second best language to English, better than perhaps as good as my Hindi and Gujarati are.
Okay.
But I have several other languages that I'm very familiar with: Bengali, Marathi, Tamil, because I sing all the love songs in Bharatanatyam. But Malayalam is the one that I have tried to learn and would love to learn the most. Not the
Okay.
reading and writing, because I don't have the time for that, but to converse in it. First of all, the political freedom. The fact that you see any film and the credit list has as many people with Christian names, as Muslim names, as Hindu names. It is impossible here. It is impossible. I go to Bengal, and in an audience, I see hijabs and I see people with a cross. And this does not happen in Gujarat. It doesn't happen in most parts of North India. That for me is such a breath of fresh air and such a weight off my back that people do not first think of religion. It is, I have suffocated for 30 years here. I went to the Trishur Drama Festival, and it was amazing to see queues and queues every evening. The love and the passion for the arts, for cinema, is just so much more alive in Kerala. It makes me feel intellectually and artistically very excited and very nourished.
Yeah.
There are several things that we are working on at Darpana. There is a book written by a Malayali woman called Karthika Nair, who has been living in Paris for many years. And you quoted history being written by the victors. Her book is called Until the Lions. And Until the Lions is a proverb from the very famous African writer Chinua Achebe. And he says that until the lions write their own history, it will always be the hunter's history that is known. And I've been wanting to do it as a production. It's the alternate voice of the lesser known or just the mentioned women of the Mahabharata. And I've been wanting to work it. I tried to do it as an Indo-French collaboration. That hasn't worked out. So I'm planning to do it in the next season. I've started research on it. It's a very dense book. But because I love reinterpreting mythological characters from a non-patriarchal point of view, it's very much something that interests me and excites me. And we've just finished a huge new project directed by Yadavan Chandran, who's the artistic director of Darpana, whose father is the famous filmmaker TV Chandran. So Yadavan's been working with me for over 20 years, and we've just done a huge new production of The Conference of the Birds, which is a 12th century Persian metaphorical poem by the guru of Rumi, Attari, and is a metaphor for the political and the existential crisis that the world sees in itself today, but told through a search of the birds for the meaning of life. And we've just done several performances. It was a huge production. So we're just taking a breather at the moment. And usually it is from April till about August that we work on new productions, because in most parts of the country, that's the off season for performance till the monsoon gets over. That's also more or less the off season for us to be traveling as much as we do the rest of the year. So collaborators come in, people from different parts of India. We learn new things. So 2 years ago, we were all learning the Chenda, because I wanted to use it for a production. I have recently been learning the Mridangam because it's something I have always loved. And as a child, my mother wouldn't let me study because she said my fingers will become stubby. But I encourage all of us in Darpana to be constantly learning new things. And the summer is the time when we learn and come up with new ideas for the new season.